Okay, so my name is Trini, as everybody knows, and I'm the founder of It Could Be Me, and I'm really, really happy to have as a guest on our second episode of the webinar, Making Road Street Safer Together, Mr. Ken McLeod. So could you tell us a little bit about yourself, Ken, please?
Yeah, Trini, thank you so much for having me. I'm Ken McLeod. I'm the policy director for the League of American Bicyclists. I am a lawyer by training. I graduated from William & Mary Law School back in 2012, and I've really worked for the league since then. I started getting involved in our Bike Law University project, and then I've stuck around since then. And currently do our policy work with an emphasis on state and local policy. The League is a national nonprofit dedicated to building a bicycle-friendly America for everyone. And we really try to focus on that mission through doing lobbying at the federal level and working with state and local organizations to promote bicycle safety and safe bicycling infrastructure, as well as bike education.
And what is your role exactly in the league? Like, what does it entail?
So my role is varied. We are an organization of about 9 people. So I do work to support our federal lobbyist, Karen Whitaker, who's our Vice President of Government Relations. I work on some agency-related advocacy with the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Federal Highway Administration. But also when we are interfacing with like the National Transportation Safety Board, when they put out their first report on bicycle safety in 40 years that they did last year. And then I also do our Bicycle Friendly State ranking, which we do every other year, where we create report cards for each state. And I was the main researcher and writer of our 2018 benchmarking report on biking and walking, which is funded by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And then I just do technical assistance and other things for advocacy organizations, trying to see what's happening at the state and local level, spread what's working to other groups, and hopefully make things better for biking.
Yeah. Well, I know I'm really grateful for you, because every time that I've ever reached out or needed any sort of data, you've been so helpful and like incredibly fast and responsive. And so thank you. Well, I guess we'll move on to the questions. Like I said, at one point, I remember I asked you about, who was out there that was like the main source of, I don't know, all of these crashes. Like, who was like the age group and the person that you could like point at and say, well, this is like the main group that is causing all these crashes. And you were very quick to say that it was males 25 to 34-year-old, correct? That's basically where we were at. And we also discussed how right now, even though there's a decrease of crashes, there's a rise in fatalities. And can you share with us why, from what you found?
Yeah, unfortunately, over the last decade, there's been an increasing trend in the fact that there's been more people killed while biking and walking. I think in 2018, it was at the highest level in 30 years, with 857 people being killed while they were biking. And we've seen with COVID-19 related closures of businesses that there has been a decrease in traffic. But a lot of places have seen an increase in speeding, an increase in reckless behaviors by drivers. And so they're seeing fewer crashes, but they're higher speed, they're higher energy, and that's going to mean, unfortunately, more serious injuries and deaths. So we haven't seen it drop in the way that traffic safety experts might want to see it drop with so many fewer miles being driven. And I think one of the things we're realizing is that in designing our roadways, a lot of the designs are relying on traffic to slow cars down. The designs themselves don't slow cars down. It's really the congestion that have made some of these roads slower.
Yeah. I also read somewhere about the size of vehicles, right? That even though, as you know, the design evolves, it's designed to keep the driver and the passengers safer, but it's more dangerous for all vulnerable users. So it's quite scary.
Yeah, that's something we've really been engaging with NHTSA on, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, as well as other national organizations. So we started like kind of thinking about automated vehicles being this thing that we have to worry about in the future. And that's led to a lot of really great conversations about the problems with cars now. So in Europe, they test their vehicles for how they hit pedestrians and how the vehicle design may cause more injuries or fewer injuries to pedestrians. And they've been doing that since the 1990s. And the US doesn't do that. The US hasn't announced that they will do that in the future. And there's several things that could benefit bicyclists and bicyclist safety that are done in other countries. So the European New Car Assessment Program tests whether vehicles can automatically brake for a bicyclist in 3 scenarios, and the United States doesn't do that. And there's no indication that the United States plans to do that anytime soon. So that's an unfortunate reality, but that's the type of advocacy that we are trying to change that, and hopefully with support of more people, we can get that done.
So what would be, like, in your ideal world, like if you could change one thing to make our country a safer place for vulnerable users, what would you do?
I think the biggest thing is really reducing speed to the extent that we can do that. There's a lot of ways you could reduce speed. I don't necessarily see us going back to a national speed limit, and I don't know that that would benefit bicyclists the most of any speed intervention. I think really what we need to do is focus on those roads that are 25 miles per hour or 30 miles per hour right now, and make sure that they are actually designed for those speeds, and make sure that we have enforcement to make sure that people are going those speeds on those roadways. And then I would also personally love to see America require intelligent speed assist in new vehicles, which helps drivers go the posted speed limit. And that's something that'll be required in all new cars in Europe in 2022, but is, again, not something that Congress or NHTSA has given an indication that they plan to require in US cars. So unfortunately, another area where we are falling behind.
I think, well, fortunately, there's a lot of communities that are being very proactive. Like I was telling you earlier, I mean, Boulder just adopted the 20 is plenty movement. And so all residential streets will be required to go 20 miles an hour. And I think the city has embraced it. I don't see anybody like stepping up and being upset about it. On the contrary. So, and I think a lot of the research that I've read really does back up the idea of, slowing down, and the death rates will decrease, right? I mean, it's the difference.
Yeah, there's some really great research and data around pedestrian fatalities related to speed.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard that the picture is a little more complicated with bicyclists because we typically are hit while the car is overtaking, and so the speed difference can be different because bicyclists can actually go fairly fast. If you're going 20 miles per hour and you're hit by a vehicle at 20 miles per hour, it's not the same as a pedestrian being hit by a vehicle going 20 miles per hour. but speed is still that key factor in reducing serious injury and death.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I guess moving to the current state of affairs, I mean, how do you think COVID has affected, like, not only crashes, but the relationship? I mean, there's this huge boom of cyclists emerging across the nation, which I find amazing, and I think we should all work toward keeping those new cyclists on board. And so, what have you seen?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree. Like, now is a time to be a great ambassador for bicycling, be super welcoming to people, you know, just meet them out there with an open heart and try to make sure that everyone is having fun. I think we have seen cities in particular take actions to make cycling easier. So in some places there are pop-up protected bike lanes. In other places there are kind of slow streets that try to manage traffic so that traffic is going to go slower and it's more obvious that the lane can be shared. But I think the biggest thing is going to be long-term, whether our cities and our states and our federal government will actually build infrastructure and create networks for these bicyclists. You know, it's easy to get out and try a new thing. It's really hard to make it a habit. And I know as a longtime bike commuter, there's often that intersection or straightaway on your route that maybe you dread a little bit every day. And when you have, you know, hopefully tens of thousands of new people, all of them are going to have that experience, and some of them will probably fall off because of that negative experience during their trip. So we need to figure out how we as a country can minimize those negative experiences where people really don't feel welcome.
Yeah, I read this wonderful article yesterday on Bicycling magazine, and it was basically how you know, we should just kind of, as seasoned cyclists, kind of like slow down and make sure that all of those new cyclists feel welcome, because at the end of the day, another cyclist is another person that is not in the car. And we want to keep them off the roads in their cars. And today I went with my husband. We commuted to his office, and I mean, we're just really lucky here because we have a bike pass that connects Boulder to Denver. And I mean, I think I touched 2 streets, but the rest of it was on the bike pass. It's amazing. So during that ride, I saw several cyclists, a lot of obviously very seasoned cyclists, but a lot of people that I could tell, I mean, you know, and I was like, yes, all the way through my ride. It was really great. And to see, all these new faces. What else? So we were talking also about this new bill, right? That's before Congress right now. Can you tell us about it?
Yes. So it is called, in the House, it's called the Invest Act, and I don't have that acronym in front of me. But it's really exciting on a lot of levels for bicycling. So at the federal level, most money for bicycling comes from this program called Transportation Alternatives. And back in 2012, Transportation Alternatives was targeted to be zeroed out. So there would be no more federal funding. And it was a big advocacy effort to kind of push that back and make sure that funding was preserved. But what happened then is they consolidated a lot of programs into this one funding program for biking and walking, and they lowered the amount that got funded. And so that basic framework was continued in the next transportation bill in 2015. But this transportation bill takes that amount of money and makes it 10% of what's called the Surface Transportation Program. And the effect of that would be that funding for biking and walking would jump about 60% to around $1.5 billion per year, and $6 billion over the course of this 4-year transportation bill. So that in and of itself would be a big win. But there's also a lot of other stuff in the bill that is really positive. There's a 1-year grant program of $250 million to fund states and local governments to build networks, really focusing on connections between communities, not just one-off projects. There's provisions that make it easier to fund safe routes to school projects and not require local matching funds. There is a program that would fund vulnerable road user safety assessments, where each state would have to do a couple of assessments of their most dangerous corridors or intersections. And the federal government would have to issue a report every 2 years on how states are addressing bicycle and pedestrian safety on those most dangerous corridors and intersections. And the US DOT would also have to create a complete streets policy and apply it to federal transportation projects. So that's just a few of the exciting things in the bill, but the big takeaway is that 60% increase in funding off the top is just great. And being a percentage of a transportation program means that anytime in the future, the presumption should be if there's more money for transportation, there's more money for biking and walking, which is just so far from where we were about a decade ago in 2012, when there's a strong effort to make sure that no money went to biking and walking from the federal government.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like a huge step. I was also, I'm this fantasist that would love to have a bill pass that would affect the whole country, or that would create this law at a federal level that would establish a consequence, a unanimous consequence for, if you're a careless driver or if you're a reckless driver, and establish something so there's no misconceptions. And I think if we did that, like other countries do, I think it'd be so much clearer and people would be more cautious. And I don't know. So every time I've approached it with people, they always say that that's not possible because, how some roads are owned by the government, some roads are owned by the city, some roads are owned by the state, to start off with, right? So, I mean, from there, it just there's so many layers to why not. So do you think that's possible? Do you think that could ever happen?
So my first, the pushback that I guess you hear every time would be traffic laws and criminal penalties are typically state laws, not usual federal laws. There are federal criminal laws, but they only exist in certain circumstances. But what the federal government does do and has done is condition money on states adopting laws. So sometimes it doesn't work. Like there's currently a grant program for graduated driver licensing that has requirements around how states would have to test their drivers and put restrictions on people who don't have their driver's license yet. And the federal government can't get that money out because no state is doing what they're asking them to do. But you could have a program that says, here's $100 million that your state can get if it adopts a law that provides this penalty for people who hit bicyclists, pedestrians, or violate, some sort of state traffic law that makes them culpable. That's something that the federal government has done, could do. That's how we used to have the nationwide 55 mile per hour speed limit. That was by conditioning funds on states adopting a law. So that's something that could be done. I've also talked to groups like Families for Safe Streets in New York City, and they're interested in making victims of traffic violence eligible for compensation in the same way that victims of other criminal acts are able to be compensated. So that would kind of expand the victim's rights, which I don't know is exactly what you would like to get at, but that's also a potential place that this type of policy could go at the federal level, is expanding that kind of concept of criminal victimhood and rights and compensation to victims of traffic violence.
No, and I think, I mean, absolutely. I think as victims, I think it's very hard to really know and understand and visualize what not only like the physical consequences of being involved in a crash, but also the mental and how much support you need. I mean, right now, today we just started the support group as part of It Could Be Me. So people can connect, like victims can connect with each other and offer support. I know that sometimes we're not as fortunate and we don't know where to turn. So we're going to be able to provide a network of like doctors, therapists, perhaps lawyers, so people can kind of turn there. And most importantly, I think to have like a buddy system where people can actually feel supported and validate their trauma, because I think that's really, really important. So yeah, that would be amazing if there would be more funding. I know here in Boulder, and I mean, this is my personal experience. I know that there is a victims compensation fund. So you have to apply for it, and it takes a while for, I think it's after your insurance runs out that you become eligible. But there is that, and I think we're very lucky to have that here. I don't know if that's everywhere else.
And I mean, no federal program is going to replace that kind of peer-to-peer, victim-to-victim understanding.
But there's funding.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, because
funding is important, and that's definitely something that the federal government can and does do. So I think it's really important to have both, and it's really good to hear that you're creating that network for victims.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. So a very, very important thing that we need to talk about, I guess, is well, the whole Black Lives Matter and how the League is what your stand is right now, and what you guys are doing to kind of mediate and take a stand, you know, for Black Lives Matter.
Yeah, we issued a statement back on June 1st that says that we support Black Lives Matter. It's part of being an organization that wants to build a bicycle-friendly America for everyone. Everyone includes Black people, and Black people face anti-Black racism in many aspects of our society, including how our built environment has been created over the decades, and how our traffic laws are enforced. So we are actively looking at our own work and our own organization, how we can make sure that we are pursuing anti-racist policies. One of the things we have done since we issued that statement is suspending the enforcement section of our bicycle-friendly community application, out of concern that some of the things in that section, as it was written, might contribute to unnecessary and potentially problematic interactions between law enforcement and the Black community. So traffic safety is extremely important to us. And oftentimes people think that traffic safety and enforcement are the two things that go together. But we really think that it's important that traffic safety is more than enforcement. And we're looking to figure out how we can make it clear that we support traffic safety without supporting the level of enforcement that's been so problematic in the Black community.
Yeah, that's great. I think it's really important to not be silent and just take a stand and make sure people know what your stand is.
Yeah, and I mean, personally, I live in Roanoke, Virginia, so we're a town about 100,000. I organized a a ride with other bicyclists where we, put signs on our bike that say Black Lives Matter. People really responded positively. And I thought it was a great event. It helped me think about how I can be more active in my community and reaching out to the Black community in Roanoke, which is very segregated as a community of 100,000. And so just trying to every day do a little more, be a little better, and take some action.
Yeah, and I think, right before COVID hit, one of our ambassadors reached out to me because, or we had this dialogue because there were several deaths in her city. She lives in Charlotte, North Carolina, and there were these cyclists that were commuting to work, but they're in the most in the poorest section of her city, and the problem they had was that these people could not afford to be seen, like literally, so they became these invisible riders that were being killed because they would ride their bikes to the bus, go to work, and then when they were coming back it was dark and they didn't have money for lights, they didn't have money for anything. So one of our ambassadors, Nadine, was amazing, and she made all these rides happen where they fundraised and they started finding visible vests, and then she went out and distributed them in her community. But so I mean, there were so many things that we wanted to do, and then COVID hit, so we kind of put a damper on things, but it's time to start up again.
Yeah, I mean, COVID does make everything harder, especially when, as a bicycling community, so often our first thought is, well, let's go for a bike ride together. COVID's made that kind of just normal thing much harder.
Yeah, but we're getting creative, which is really interesting. I've also seen how people have found a way to connect, and I think that's really cool. So
and the science around COVID does seem like it's looking a little more positive for outdoor activities. I haven't heard of any major hotspots associated with kind of biking or a greenway where people might be passing each other. Doesn't mean people shouldn't be cautious. Doesn't mean people shouldn't be looking to limit their exposure when they're biking. But so far, it looks like it might not be super easy to catch while biking.
No, I think that's like the recommendation is for people to go outside and exercise for an hour. And yeah, in the beginning it was very overwhelming for me. I didn't know, you start putting things in perspective and kind of try to understand how life is going to move forward. But then one day I was looking out my window and all the cars were replaced by families walking around, families riding their bikes, and it just hit me. I'm like, well, now more than ever we have to be very proactive and kind of try to reach as many people as possible so they can realize that it could be any of us right on the roads. So yeah. What else? I don't know. What do you think? I was very fortunate in the whole legal process that I was involved with, as far as the bill and being a witness, and I had really a great experience. And I was contacted by people that have years of expertise in the subject, so I was just kind of like along for the ride, and I learned a ton. But I know a lot of people don't have that experience or that luck. So what would you recommend for someone that wants to be involved and change things in their community? Like what, in a legal way, like what could they do? What would you suggest?
I mean, I think it's important for everyone to be kind of true to themselves. You know, not everyone's going to want to draft an ordinance. Not everyone's going to want to speak at city council, but everyone can do something. So that might be talking to other people on your club about a dangerous stretch of road that you're interested in doing something to make better. You know, you can do direct advocacy, like a ride on that road to bring attention to it. A lot of places you can talk to your city council or bicycle or pedestrian advisory committee or some other city committee. You know, if your city has a bicycle coordinator, you can raise concerns with them. You know, if you're looking to change a law, you're probably going to be looking to do it at the state level, because local ordinances can only go so far in some states. So that's probably going to take reaching out to a state advocacy organization. It might take contacting an organization that's outside the bicycling community but is involved in legal advocacy. And it's a little harder to organize that direct action, those rides, but you might be able to reach out to your state legislator or their office, and just talk about the issues that affect you, why you think it's important, and then hopefully find other people who believe the same thing and organize.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great advice. I think people are not aware, and yeah, just giving them resources is so important. I guess one thing that I wanted to know is, like, what is the most positive change that you've seen since you've been there?
I mean, it's been really good to see more cities being more proactive around biking. It feels like there is more political will, particularly at the city level, to create safe bicycle infrastructure and safe bicycle networks. I feel like I haven't seen as many places kind of be hostile or kind of bristle at the suggestion that they should make changes for bicycling. There's more places that are really engaging with it as something that needs to be done now.
Mm-hmm.
I think, you know, seeing this transportation bill, we can even see that in that funding biking and walking isn't an issue, isn't something that they're trying to get rid of. There might be differences between the House and Senate, or Republicans and Democrats, about how biking and walking should be promoted. But everyone is on board with it being something that should be promoted and something that should be improved. And that's positive in a way that wasn't guaranteed when I joined the league and back in 2012.
That's really cool. I mean, yeah, everybody in their own way, but everybody working towards the same goal. I think that's really cool. And well, I guess finally, how can we support you and the league? I mean, what if we wanted to do something to support you guys?
So yeah, the League of American Bicyclists, you can find us at bikeleague.org. You can find me probably on Twitter is the easiest, at Ken MCLD. We are a membership organization. I believe memberships are $40 per year, and we get a significant amount of our revenue from membership. So it's, you know, we love when people support us. If people want to get more involved directly, the best way to do that is probably through our bicycling education program of league cycling instructors. I believe that there's over 6,000 league cycling instructors throughout the country who teach bicycling education classes, like Preston. And you know, that's an amazing group of people who really care about their communities and really want to make bicycling better. And again, I guess if you're at the local level and looking to make a connection to make a change, the league cycling instructors can be found on our Connect Locally utility on our website, bikeleague.org.
That's really cool. And maybe Preston can tell us a little bit about what it is that entails.
The league cycling instructors, one of the big things and why a lot of people get the designation is that we are covered by insurance when we are teaching. So that's a huge impact because we are teaching people to go ride in traffic. And there's a lot of liability in that. But the program's been around in its current form since about 1972. It's been modified significantly in the period from about 98 to about 2007. There were major changes and major revisions and all the work. And when I got my LCI in 1996, I was the 518th instructor that had been qualified. And now, as like Ken says, we've got 6,600. It's somewhere in that range now. So it really ramped up from, like that 98, 99 period on up. And it's not an easy course. It's 21 hours over 3 days typically. And you have to work at it, don't you, Ken?
So I'm not an LCI.
Oh.
I was signed up to do the class in Arlington in April, and unfortunately that had to be postponed. But I believe there are some classes that are going forward in the near future that are scheduled for maybe July or August.
Virtual format. And we've been working the coaches. We have about 21 coaches around the country who train LCIs. And we've been working on developing a virtual format that can work so that we don't have large groups of people in a room together for hours. So I will be doing one in Richardson, Texas, virtually in September, I think. But the last one that happened before this was in Hawaii.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, right, yeah. Happened in February, I believe, was the last one that was in person. So they've been trying to figure out how do we put it back together again. And so this one in September may be one of the first virtual seminars that comes up. So that's actually easier on me because to go 4 hours on Friday night and then 8 hours on Saturday and a night ride and then another 7 hours or so on Sunday is really hard on the coaches. So it's this virtual, I think, may make it easier and may make it better for certainly the knowledge part of a seminar. And knowledge is a fairly small part of it, but the knowledge that we're teaching in that seminar is how to teach, not what to teach. Because before you get into that seminar, you should know enough about it so that you're not floundering on what to teach. It's how do you teach? So that's the 21 hours of teaching practice pretty much is what it comes down to. So that's fun. I think I look back and I have now certified over 1,000 instructors in my lifetime. And
wow.
So
awesome.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And I'm getting to the point now where I'm saying, wait a minute, isn't it time for somebody younger than me to take over this role? So
Ken?
I mean, I was signed up for the class, and I'm sure I'll sign up again once things are sorted out. Because it's a huge part of what our organization does, and it's been something that's been on my radar to do for several years now. And I was bummed when COVID hit and kind of threw a wrench in that.
One of the things, Trini, I think is specifically applicable to our discussion is there's a new program that was started in Fort Collins, and it's called Bicycle Friendly Driver. And it's a program was specifically aimed at fleet drivers. So let's go talk to the bus company. Let's go talk to the delivery drivers. Let's go talk to those people. 90-minute session, and really gets the point across about what's different, why are cyclists out there, what you should be doing around cyclists. And it's a really powerful program, and it is now being rolled out so that LCIs can begin to teach it. It was developed by LCIs in Fort Collins, and they said, sure, let's get it out. So it's It's going to be an amazing program. But that's the other side of education. We can only educate so many cyclists. We need to educate the motorists. We need to educate the judges. We need to educate all those people to make it safe on the road. You know, and that's, everybody has an impact on us when we're on the road, every driver and, you know, the police officers, everybody. So they need to be educated. So this program is really powerful for educating everybody but cyclists. And so this is one of the areas that I really want to be pushing.
You know, well, that's in effect here. I mean, that course was part of the driver that hit me. That was part of a sentence. He had to take that course, which was amazing. Yeah. Yeah. And it was very funny because he said, oh, the first thing I did was take a driver's ed course. And the judge said, yeah, well, you have to take this one, very specific one. I was like, oh. Yeah. So it's a great step.
Our municipal court also allows that if you are stopped for a bicycle infraction, you can get it wiped off. If it's the first time in 12 months, you can get it wiped off your record and pay no fine if you'll go take a course.
Wow, that's nice.
So our LCI has worked with the court system to get that in place, and so it's really a cool program.
Yeah, I always like those programs because, I mean, so people aren't taught how to bike according to standard curriculum through like schools. So people are out there and they might be biking incorrectly and not knowing it. So to give them the opportunity to learn rather than to just punish them with a fine always seemed like a really good idea.
Yeah, I think it has to be twofold. I think it has to be, we have to educate drivers and we have to educate cyclists. And once there's like a uniform or like a statement, or I'm sorry, like something that we can provide where everything is clear and there's no misunderstandings and we know what the expected behaviors are, then, you know, then it's a level play field. Yeah. But what you said, I mean, if we had some sort of course when we are in school and kind of to understand, you know, how cyclists can behave and how motorists can behave and what the relationship should be, I think it could save a lot of lives.
Yeah, I mean, it's just an unfortunate fact that in way too many states, you can go through your driver's ed, you can get your license, and you might not ever really hear about how you're supposed to behave around a bicyclist. I had an intern last year who looked at state driver's manuals, and a lot of them just don't have basic information about what to do around a bicyclist, how to pass a bicyclist, how to deal with a bicyclist when you're turning. It's just not there.
Yeah, which is absolutely terrifying. But yeah. So on that note, does anybody have any questions for Ken or for Preston or for anybody? Questions? Maybe not. No questions.
Ken, I like your license plate.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Hey, Trini, this is Steve Curlin. Actually, I do have a question. What
Great,
sort
Steve.
of like, can you guys hear me all right?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
What sort of specifications are used when they build like, you know, a bike lane divider? I saw one in California that was actually made by using those, you know, those parking lot concrete stubs that you kind of, you know, drive up into to stop your tires. And they had lined those up like every 6 feet, which would cause a horrific accident if you're on a bike and change out of the lane or push out of the lane. Is there any sort of like national standard on how they mark and then, you know, corn off a bike lane?
So there are national standards through something called the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. But those standards will cover the markings, kind of. So, you know, if that line is a single line, double line with hashes, things like that, the materials used aren't really covered under that. And so we do see a wide range of materials used.
Mhm.
And with some cities doing pop-up infrastructure for
Mhm.
COVID-related purposes,
Mhm.
we're probably seeing even more types of materials used.
Mm.
Sometimes just traffic cones.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's any national standard that would cover that kind of barrier. There is interest in it.
Yeah.
The league has been a member of the body that makes suggestions for changes to
Okay.
that manual
Yeah.
for many years. And I think we might see some changes
Yeah.
as things evolve, but I wouldn't hold my breath for it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it seems like something very easy to kind of make standard to, again, save people's lives.
Yeah. I mean, it just, just maybe a little bump or something so that, you're over it, or the driver knows you're over it.
Yeah.
So, but,
and
it can't be anything that will, cause you to crash or cause the driver to crash. I mean, it just kind of defeats the purpose.
Yeah, and Preston brings up in the chat NACTO, the National Association of City Transportation Officials, who have really done a great job of providing guidance on how to design bicycle infrastructure. The bicycling professionals have also been anxiously awaiting the AASHTO guide, which has been in the process of being updated for, I want to say, the last 4 years. And my expectation is that it'll take another 2 years until we see that guide. But that is the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials. And that is a very influential guide that they may look to for barrier advice. But we might not see that for another couple of years.
Okay, thank you.
One thing that, now that you mentioned like how long it takes, I mean, one thing that kind of blew my mind when we spoke a long time ago was how long the cycle takes in order for us to get statistics and in order for us to know what's going on the roads. I mean, I think you said it was 2 years. And
yeah, so like the NHTSA statistics, the most recent ones are from 2018. There's been 2 different estimates of 2019 numbers published so far. One was from NHTSA, one was from the Governor Highway Safety Administration, and they don't agree whether bicyclist and pedestrian deaths have gone up or down. So I think by the fall we'll have final 2019 numbers from NHTSA. But then it'll almost be 2021. So.
Well, yeah. Well, at least we have the data eventually, right?
Yeah, and it's one of those hard things about statistics. You need the data, but the data never does justice to how people's lives are really affected. And even if the 2019 numbers show the 1 or 2% decrease that NHTSA estimated, I think we know it's not enough, and we really need to be making more progress towards zero traffic deaths. So I mean, the data certainly important and has its use, but also is always going to be insufficient to capture the real impacts of traffic violence.
Yeah. What I'm really encouraged with is the amount of people that have become and continue to become passionate about creating safer environments and safer roads for vulnerable users. I mean, it seems like there's so many people, and my only hope is for us to be able to work together as we move forward, because I think that's where our strength will lie. Well, thank you so much, Ken, for being here and for, just sharing all this information with us. I think it's really important for people to know.
Yeah, so glad to talk to you. Thank you for inviting me on here. And I really hope that we as a community can all work together moving forward, because you know, one of the things I've heard about biking and walking, why we're never gonna fully get to the places we want to be, is we don't have big kind of corporate backers.
Mhm.
There's no industrial complex behind biking and walking in the way that there is around the automobile. But what we do have is people, and we have a lot of passionate people who care. So I think that's our strength.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much again, and thank you for everybody that's here and everybody that will listen to this in the future. Until next Wednesday, Pete Piccolo is going to be with us from Bicycle Colorado, and it'll be a really interesting time as well. So thank you, everybody. And
Yeah, thank you for having me.
bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.